Matt, you okay? All right. The quiz that you took yesterday, I think a lot of you probably noticed I put it into our school progress book. I won't pass them back until I have like the makeups done, so you can look at them. And there are others, you have to do it later on in the afternoon. So if you do want to see your quiz, for whatever reason, like some people in homeroom want to take a look at it, I can show it to you. It's not like hidden from you or anything like that. I just don't pass them back until everyone has stated it. So very well might be able to get them back tomorrow. I would think at the absolute latest would end up being Monday, after the weekend. But you will get them back, so don't worry about that. But if you do want to see it, let me know. I wouldn't worry about reading too much into scores. You're asking about what the average score is. I don't know because it doesn't tell me that. I haven't computed it yet. My guess is probably around the 15 point some weird number or anything like that. So it's not like, yes, I'm good if you're above it, or boo, I'm below it. It's the first one. Don't read too much into it. Certainly there's going to be a lot more points coming in, good, bad, and in between. I would say the quiz that you had yesterday was probably a little more detailed than what some of the other ones would be. So you don't have to respect that same kind of level of stuff. But yeah, so take it for what you want. But if you have any questions, let me know. There weren't any where I was scoring it and going, boy, schedule change, we need to take care of this, staff. You're welcome to stay. I'm not kicking out the Mrs. Burns. Unless you want to learn about Bruce Springsteen. 74 pictures in that room.
That's so creepy.
On display. There's more in the room, but I'd say 74 on display. It's not creepy. It's just a fan. If Luke had 74 pictures of me, that would be creepy. But he's just a fan. Yeah, that's right. I don't think Luke's that big of a fan. Maybe, I don't know. Okay, that's understandable. Tomorrow, I want you to have read I Have a Dream. That's in the yellow book, the Bedford Reader that you got, and you want to bring the Bedford Reader with you tomorrow because we'll certainly be taking a look at the speech. There is not a quiz, or anything like that. There's not a homework assignment so far as you filling out questions and answering them or anything along that. I just want us all to be on the same page that you've read it so that we can talk about it. You'll actually do some stuff independently with it, probably in small groups, and then we'll start going over some things together as a class. Basically, we're going to be doing, Diddles and Spa kind of for that, as if you were going to do a writing assignment for it. You're not, but just to give you a little bit more practice with how all that stuff works. So while you're reading it, if you go, hey, I see some imagery, you can certainly take note of it. Your Bedford Reader, if you're a sticky tab person, by all means, you can go ahead and put sticky tabs and notes in there. How many? I don't know. You and Aiden got a competition there. If in your books, I really don't have a problem if you do want to underline stuff. Just do it in pencil. If you want to lightly mark something in Bedford Reader or in Grapes of Wrath, I don't have a problem with that. So, and you can always leave notes that will mislead people next year. Like, this is really important. So that's your call. Just don't do it in pen. Rough draft, for Wednesday. I would start working on that if you haven't already. Maybe over the weekend, start thinking about how you're going to set it up. If you wait till Tuesday night, you're going to be running probably into some obstacles. Keep in mind, you do need to have a paper copy with you on Wednesday for that rough draft so we can check it in, do some peer editing, and all those kinds of things. So, any schedule questions about where we're at or anything? Yesterday, we were taking a look at the SPA, coming up with the thesis statement, and finishing off the diddles, the ideas to what those things stand for with the rhetorical devices. Again, not meaning you know exactly what you're going to do, but do people at least have a better idea how you're going to get there so far as what we mean by devices, coming up with thesis statements? Any questions, concerns, anything dealing with those two things, diddles and SPA? Ben, you might have some questions. So we can talk about that later, and then also you can always go online. We got the lovely video that you can check out. Anybody else? Okay. I'm going to write down diddles again because it's fun. Now, I don't mean that you have to give me answers or feedback based on diction, imagery, details, figurative language, syntax, but Chapter 5, you took a look at it. You had a quiz, on it yesterday. anything that you noticed reading it a second time that you didn't pick up on the first time, be it, hey, here's an example of diction or imagery, or just didn't notice that the first time. Can be related to this, can just be overall feedback comment.
There's like a lot of imagery, especially like when they're talking about like the ground and the details that they put into the house.
Mm-hmm.
Like, especially with like when they were talking about like the spigot, the pot thing.
Mhm.
How it had like that iron handle, flowers, and just like just hanging on the ground was. So it was like really
And so obviously the details didn't magically appear between the first time you look at the chapter and the second time, but we're just kind of aware of that more so. And I think that will, I don't want to say for every single chapter, but the expository chapters, I think if you did look at them, you would notice that there is a lot of detail. And I think we talked about, especially environment-wise, you get a lot of description with that. Keep in mind, the expository chapter, you basically have a book. You have a story, which would be the Job book. And you shouldn't do this, but theoretically, you could almost alternate chapters and read the book, and everything would make sense about the Jobs. You could read chapter 2, you could read chapter 4, you could read chapter 6, so on and so forth, and you'd have an entire story. What would happen if you only read the expository chapters? So you read chapter 1, chapter 3, chapter 5, chapter 7. Would you have a complete story per se? Not really.
I was gonna say, I feel like you'd have a series of kind of like short stories, like all about the time period.
Yeah, I mean, you would certainly have a collection. You'd almost have like another Bedford Reader, an anthology. And they would all be related thematically, but they would certainly be about different things. There might be some little things that kind of link stuff together. And again, I didn't read this chapter. Anyone remember the nails, the fingernails of the turtle from chapter 3? What color they are? They're yellow. I don't remember if we talked about that. Too many times. I can't keep my mind straight. What the heck's going on with that turtle? Were you saying? Or? Go ahead. I was sweating like Luke there for a moment. Yeah. Crawling. Where? You're waiting for the chicken to show up. As to getting to the other side. It's crawling across the road. It's going across the highway. What does a turtle carry with it? Shell. Which its shell is its home, its habitat. Keep in mind what's going on. What's happening?
Things are like put into the story.
Sure.
Well, they're gonna have to leave
And they're going along the highway. It's going across Route 66. The turtle's going across Route 66. There's certainly some similarities that would be taking place. Carry your home, carry your belongings, trying to get to the other side, the promised land. Tom Joad has on, when he gets out of jail, yellow shoes. So there's these couple little links. After the turtle chapter, what does Tom come across and pick up? The turtle. So there certainly are thematic things that link it all together and make it a story. But you're right, it'd almost be like a collection of, maybe not short stories since it's more nonfiction, but like essays. But the voices certainly change throughout. So don't think of it as Steinbeck having the same voice throughout, but I bet you would notice some things like that imagery, that description starting to pop up maybe a little bit more often if you went through it a second time. What else? Chapter 5. So we got description, details, a lot of imagery taking shape. Anything else to note of? Had an aha moment?
I noticed that whenever the spokespeople from the tenants were talking with not from the tenants, from the owners,
Mm-hmm.
when they were talking with the tenants, they didn't use quotations. It was just like, I thought that was cool. I didn't really know why he chose to do that, but
It's different.
interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't happen a whole lot. We have another book that we might look at later this year, As I Lay Dying. William Faulkner, he does not use quotation marks a whole lot. Cormac McCarthy is a writer that's still alive today. No Country for Old Men, All the Pretty Horses. He doesn't use punctuation a whole lot of times. So people do it. It's kind of rebellious, especially if you're taking conventions of writing. But this is Paul Mary. I wouldn't suggest doing that. Any thoughts as to why I would do that? It happens in here. It happens in chapter 7 a lot too. That's the used car salesman chapter. where they have to buy the cars and whatnot. Any ideas as to why you wouldn't use quotation marks besides being lazy?
Like, especially when he's talking about, like, for an example, he says, like, yes, you can do that, and it's perhaps for one day, and he has to borrow money from the bank. Like, that's supposed to be a quote, but I feel like it's also, the author trying to say it as well.
Okay.
So, sort of like, it acts as a proof of that way.
So you have, and we don't really have characters in the way of Tom and Al and Connie and whatnot in this chapter, but you still have people speaking, but it allows for Steinbeck to kind of bring his viewpoint, so you get a little bit of a meld of narration and quotation dialogue taking place. That's good.
I feel like it also kind of, like, distance yourself from the story a little bit. Like, instead of being in the story with the characters, it's more like you're watching them on the TV screen.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
Sure. Like an out of body experience. You know what? You're there, but you're not there for part of it. Michelle.
You can just kind of feel how more worried they are whenever you guys use quotations, it kind of runs together more.
Mm-hmm. And in some cases, like it's not just the quotations, but periods, commas. They're still there, but they're not there as often. And again, not to go back to this chapter, but that 7th chapter does that a lot, where you get these quick sentences, and it kind of creates that anxiety that folks might be feeling.
It feels like more universal and like less like individual instances.
Because what quotation marks do is it signifies that, okay, Kaylee is now talking, and now Olivia is talking, and now Abby is talking, and now Jake and Nick and folks who don't even exist in this room. But the quotation marks identify that it is their turn. You're right, you take those things away, it certainly could be any of those folks, but it has a little bit more universal feeling to it. So from that tittle standpoint, what we're taking a look at this point, would be syntax with the lack of punctuation. Specifically, quotation marks being one of those things. We already were getting some examples of imagery taking place with description of environment. Abby, did you say the homes too?
Yeah.
For the imagery that you were taking note, the details, description of environment, details of homes. Now, a word that some people might throw off, you did mention the details. That doesn't mean just because the details of the homes that it automatically goes into here, because for the details, more often we think of like specific information, more like that numeric quality that would take place. We certainly do still have details happening within this chapter. What are some details that pop up? Okay, so the amount of land. So there's another detail that pops up. You get the $3 a day. So sure, those are specific details that would come up as well. Anything else?
And so whenever it talks about like the whole $3 a day, like the time I was saying like for your $3 a day, like 20 families get 100.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of tie.
So it's almost like on one side $3, on the other side 20 families, and this sets up a philosophical conundrum. Is the tractor driver in the wrong for doing the job and getting paid his $3? Some people are going, yes. Some I don't know. From his vantage point, what does he have to do? You got to provide for your family. If he doesn't do it, no one else certainly is going to. Obviously, the bank's not going to come around. Here's $50. That'll help you out for a little while. They're going to plow through. Either you get crushed or you join them. Now, certainly, if you're one of those 20 families, is he doing the right thing? No, he's ruining my life. Plus, he's also a what? Because he used to be one of us. I mean, that's what makes it hard. You know him. Now he's a traitor. He's gone over to the other side. So those details can be powerful. And in 2016, this doesn't seem like a big deal. $3, you're gonna like run over people's homes for $3. Yeah, if my kid needs shoes and I need sandwich and food and clothing, whatever I can get, I will certainly do. So you do start to see maybe some sympathy not only for these people, but this guy is put in a really tough bind.
And I think that like kind of goes with the I and the we.
Mm-hmm.
How people can be more of themselves with their idea and other to be different.
And certainly, the order in which these things appear, this occurs before that whole shift starts to take place. A lot of folks certainly would look at it and go, "Yep, I understand what he's doing. Can't argue." Then you get to that chapter later on, and maybe by page 206, when it's really starting to show up a good bit, you go, maybe I shouldn't do that. And there's not a right answer to whether he did the right thing or the wrong thing. But it's certainly that philosophical dilemma that does kind of come up. But now you kind of start to see how that relationship unfolds, among those what seem to be separate chapters, and also what's going on, obviously, within the Jodes. What else taking note of? We kind of started to shift over to diddles. So we have imagery, details, syntax. Notice anything with diction or figurative language? Since we're on a roll. Lydia?
There's a lot of figurative language in describing the
Okay. Any specific ones come up for you? Putting you on the spot now.
I think we would have compared it to like sort of like a human in some part, like maybe a huge like I think it for example.
We're shifting from the I to the we. We're helping out.
Also, there's like personification, like when it like kind of describes it like breathing.
Mm-hmm. So you're getting personification. There's certainly some similes taking place with it. There's a lot of imagery that also occurs with the tractor. On page 49, I think it describes like the iron teeth, breaking up the ground. With that imagery metaphor, you also start having that apply to the tractor driver himself. With the goggles, the muzzle's almost like kind of becoming a robot. Did I steal your thunder? Yeah. It's the advantage of being me. I get to say whatever I want. Jordan, did you have a hand up earlier? Okay, yep. And that's certainly one that does come up quite a bit within this chapter. So you get that, since it does keep recurring, you get that extended metaphor. If you were to look at this chapter as, one text, I guess you could kind of argue motif since it keeps coming up. Motif, though, does tend to be a little bit more of a fictional thing as opposed to nonfiction. Since you have such a short document, you don't really use motif as much because it doesn't have to come up, as many times as it would in a lengthier text. But yeah, absolutely. And with that monster, you get that personification again, breathing prophets and whatnot. Keep in mind, too, that when it comes to rhetorical devices, not just for this text, but most, familiar with what a Venn diagram is? I've certainly seen them before. If you don't remember, it's the circles. You used to do this with similarities and differences. A and B, differences would be out here, similarities in the middle. You could take an example, and like the monster, for the bank is a perfect one. Someone could argue, those are terrible circles, that you have extended metaphor. Someone could argue personification, since it's breathing prophets and whatnot. Someone might argue that it is a type of imagery taking place, or if I say diction, what do I need to put in front of it? I need to put an adjective. I don't know if violent would necessarily work. Demonic. There you go. But you could have person A go personification, person B go extended metaphor, person C go with some type of diction, and they absolutely all could be correct, because there is carryover among those things. How do you decide what it's going to be? That might depend upon what your other examples are. If you already have a lot of examples of personification, you're not going to put monster there because you want to take care of something else. So it might move over to an extended metaphor or a type of diction. So just because Nicole has one example in imagery, Carol puts it someplace else, and Jack has it in a third category, it doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong. Now, sure, you could put something in the wrong category. If you were going to use of monster, it's really significant syntax in the sentence. Probably not going to be the case. If you look on page 49, about halfway down that first paragraph, the driver sat in his iron seat, and he was proud of the straight lines he did not will, proud of the tractor he did not own or love, proud of the power he could not control. I could see some folks taking a look at what word in that sentence. See a lot of words actually, but proud because it keeps coming up multiple times. Maybe that's from a diction standpoint people look at. Misguided diction. Why are you proud of running over people's homes or doing something that you really don't control? I could also see someone taking that and going the fact that it repeats over and over, put it in what other category? Could be in syntax, because what kind of sentence is that? Since the format of it keeps repeating, it is in what kind of form or structure? Parallel. So maybe the fact that it's in parallel structure, it keeps reiterating a certain idea over and over and over again. So certainly just because something pops up into one category doesn't mean it goes into another. It's by no means a great word, but I think there is a great example of effective word choice by Steinbeck also within that paragraph, up above that sentence. Anyone want to take a guess what I'm looking at? Yeah, it's the word raping. The word raping certainly has a strong negative connotation to it. With the use of that word, Steinbeck sends a very strong message. If you were to write that sentence, I don't think a high percentage of people would use raping. I think they would try to come up with something else. But what is happening? Well, what are the tractors doing? They are taking advantage of the land. What are they doing? They are showing, I know I wrote that word, sorry, no remorse, no feeling for the action. That's an effective word for that point that he's trying to get across. So you can see how just one individual word, not the fact that it comes up twice with the whole sentence that it's in, but the fact that he uses that, it expresses a certain idea that other words just don't do quite as effectively. Regardless of what device you end up selecting for your paragraphs, it's not necessarily, the hard part's not finding the device, the hard part's not finding the example. The more difficult or challenging part is explaining why that device, that example, reinforces the main argument. So if a person were to go, Steinbeck's use of the word raping really delivers his messages to what's happening to the migrants, I still don't know what it means. You would still have to explain how it does develop, how it does deliver that overall message. Explaining your thought process is a key thing in any kind of analytical piece, because you have to know exactly why you think that example is the best one for whatever you're looking at. And that's where your paragraphs kind of develop their content. What's an easy way to write not that a lengthy essay is good, but for the first couple, people want to try to show off a little bit. What's the easiest way to write a lengthy essay? You have to quote from the book. Some people do this. They quote really long passages. But if that's what you do, the lengthier the passage, my vantage point is then the lengthier your explanation is going to have to be. You don't have to have lengthy passages, in order to get the point across. You pick the appropriate passage and you explain it. You sit right there, you get picked on. I'm sorry, it's going to happen. If Matt took 3 block quotes, really lengthy ones into one paragraph, sure, it might take up a page and a half, but that paragraph then is basically written not by you, but by John Steinbeck. We already read his writing, now we're looking for yours. So just don't fall into the trap of, this is a lengthier one, that's what I want to use, but you want to try to find the right terms, the right examples for the point that you're trying to get across. So for one chapter, I mean, we already took care of, yeah, all 5 of the options. Certainly there'd be more examples of figurative language that we could come up with. But probably as you look over parts, you'll start to notice more of these things coming up. That doesn't mean coming up with that SPA statement is an automatic slam dunk. And so if you find yourself that you are struggling with still coming up with an idea, that's where our new acronym for the day comes in. Last acronym for the week, I promise. Anybody know it? If you keep flipping your head to side, it helps you think better. SOAPSTone. Had to kind of cheat a little bit. Tone means tone. Working backwards, subject, purpose, which we've heard before when we did our SPA. Any guess for A? Not attitude, because we already got tone. Not argument, good guess though. Audience. Occasion. Speaker. Who is the speaker for the Grapes of Wrath? John Steinbeck. Don't write down John Steinbeck. Now, you could, some people mention characters and whatnot, and you can make that argument depending on the book. Generally, I'd say you want to go with the author, or if it's a speech, Martin Luther King, you would go with the speaker. What's the problem of just writing down the name John Steinbeck? Because what you're trying to do with the SOAPSTone is get a better understanding of where the book is coming from, what the overall argument ideas are going to be. Whenever you're analyzing a text, what part do you focus on? The pages in between the cover. However, a lot of times there's external ideas, concepts out there that can be just as important, and that's what the SOAPSTone tries to do. If you have a person who is unfamiliar with the book, do they gain anything by knowing that John Steinbeck is the writer? Unless you're a Steinbeck aficionado, probably not. So what we want to try to come up with are what are some abstract qualities that we could use to describe John Steinbeck. Anybody have any ideas about any information about Steinbeck other than he wrote a couple books? Actually wrote a lot of books. I don't really expect that you would. I'm just seeing if anyone has any input. Nothing.
In the introduction, I can't think of adjective, but it said that he did something where he like went to see, I forget if it was like migrant families or just other people who were affected by the Great Depression that he helped them out.
He visited the camps. He went to like the Hoovervilles and whatnot. He was not a migrant himself, and he did not work in the camps. But when he was gaining information, knowledge about the text, he traveled Route 66. Visiting, helping, intermingling with the migrants themselves, the people in the camp. So, sure, the fact that he has firsthand knowledge of the experience, so to speak. It's not the same as getting kicked out of your home or watching it crushed, by a tractor or a bulldozer, but he did see it happen. You and I could write a novel about the Civil War, but we can't experience the Civil War. He was at least able to get kind of closer to it than you or I could, since we're not alive. So yeah, that's good. Carol?
I think the introduction said something about you had like a couple of friends who were like communists, so like that kind of maybe like you could argue that it kind of influenced him in the direction of like embracing.
Yeah, there is certainly. Some would call him like an activist, political activist, and with that you would have socialism. You certainly are getting that push towards communal living, I to we. In the 1950s, when the Red Scare is going on, and a lot of screenwriters, actors, directors, authors are getting, the finger pointed at communist, and being blackballed by Hollywood and publishers, Steinbeck's one of the guys who basically goes to the Supreme Court and says, no, you can't do this, you can't allow it to happen when Arthur Miller is getting prosecuted. So, Yeah, he does take a very vocal role in that. That'd be good. Where do you think he's from? Like state, region? Hmm? I don't know what Luke said.
Rhode Island.
Rhode Island. He's from California. A lot of folks assume he's Midwest, because you're following what the migrants are doing in sympathy for him. He's from California, which in some ways is a little ironic because he doesn't paint a pretty nice picture of California. Now, he lives in the East Coast by this point because he would be in New York City. He left California after attending Stanford for a few years, but he is from California, so he certainly does have some knowledge of that area. But you might be expecting a more biased view of, no, it's not that bad, in California, but he's painting a pretty ugly picture about what's happening. Occasion, you're looking at time period. It could be events that are happening just so you can kind of figure out where the place and time of this would be. The publication date is 1939. Certainly, this book is centered around what kind of event? Dust Bowl, Great Depression, so those things are very fresh in the minds of people. Not that the book covers it, but globally, what's about to happen, or what is happening, you have World War II now starting to take place. Germany is invading Poland, Austria, and which is kind of interesting. Maybe it doesn't happen with the Dust Bowl, but a lot of people look at World War II, what does it do to the nation? Actually brings it together, and he's advocating for this to happen before it does. Audience, I'm going to skip on here for a second. Purpose is the same thing we did from the SPA, verbs, one-word verbs that we try to come up with. Subject is basically what is the focal point of the book content-wise, and then tone is same thing as like the attitude. So subject, you could have people mentioning, again, Dust Bowl, forced migration, I know we were coming up with purposes yesterday. We can reuse some of those, but what might be some other purposes that you would want to think about now based on some of the information we know about him, being from California, having that firsthand knowledge experience, being an activist? What would be some purposes that he would have? Ben, by the way, if you ever use the word show as a purpose, Michelle will attack you. Kind of purpose. I mean, yesterday we were doing that whole expose, reveal. We had like explicate and all that kind of fancy stuff.
Kind of like bring attention to like how bad people were treated.
That's not one word.
Oh,
Need a verb. We'll think. Jack? Introduce? Yeah, in some cases you could be. Because you would be, like, to whom would, I don't mean specifically a person, but what type of person would this be introduced to?
Someone that doesn't know about what happened.
Okay, someone who's unaware. If you introduce a concept, I also try to do what? I'm thinking of an ED word. Educate, teach. So those could be some ideas. What was the phrase that, Abby, you bring attention to? Generally, we would say activists do bring attention to things. They probably advocate. I don't know if that's necessarily the word that you were, kind of thinking about, but you're still calling attention to an issue if you advocate. What would you think that he is hoping would happen? Maybe through the publication of the book.
Maybe more people turn to socialism.
Okay, so there could be some kind of change that would take place. Now, change isn't going to quite work, but if you're trying to call upon change, especially like in society or government, there's some words that we do use for that. Like instigate or incite some kind of change, yeah. I'm thinking of an R word. Revise. Reform. Now again, the hope is that as you start thinking about it, when you do go to your SPA for that thesis statement, you can carry over one of those purposes. You know, which one best speaks to what you are trying to do. You've already now kind of started to hit on the audience. Because, I mean, Jack and you were saying, like, if you introduce it, you're introducing to people who are unaware, and I don't mean this in a negative sense, but you are introducing it to the ignorant. Those who just don't know about it. Chances are, what part of the country probably isn't as knowledgeable about this as other parts. Rhode Island, East Coast, probably is not as aware as California, you know, what's going on in the Midwest. So yeah, it very well could be people on the East Coast. It could be the well-to-do or the elite. Not my problem. If you're looking to reform, what entity could also be an audience? Not just society, but Olivia? Yeah, it could be government. So the hope is this gives you some idea as to overall objective that he's trying to do. Notice for audience, we did not put high school student in English class, because that's not really what we're worried about so far as what is Steinbeck's scope. And tone, we already took care of the other day. You folks were mentioning things like sympathetic. We had anger. I think we had something like hopefulness mentioned. You know, hopeful that maybe some change would take place. But the plan is then by filling out a SOAPSTone, after you've started to locate what your rhetorical devices are, it puts you in a better frame of mind to start to come up with an argument. You know, and I'm not being critical about these, but you know my dislike for the word show, or just something like display, illustrate, convey, teach, advocate, reform, instigate. Those pack more punch, power behind them so far as what that argument is going to be about. So far as the audience and knowing the subject, that gives you a better idea as to what is that overall argument going to be. So the one that you're working out, effects of the decibel and the migrant people, no, you're not going to really probably focus on how he is trying to, probably pass on socialism. Some folks could go in that direction. I don't think a whole lot will, but it certainly makes you more aware of what he's trying to do. Should you focus on that I to we? Well, if you know he's a socialist advocate, kind of makes a little bit more sense as to why he would mention something along those lines. So diddles and SOAPSTone are nice brainstorming activities, and they take some time. It's not always going to be a 2-3 minute thing, but it's a good way to kind of get yourself in the right frame of mind, so then you can put together an effective SPA thesis statement, so then you know what that whole essay is going to be about. We're just going to do the same thing tomorrow with Martin Luther King, so you get more practice with all those steps, so that we can be as effective as possible when it comes to this one.